When a reclusive artist with a fear of being touched is commissioned to paint a portrait of a notoriously seductive burlesque dancer, she finds her carefully controlled world unraveling. Each stroke of the brush becomes an act of intimacy, each session a lesson in exquisite torture. Now, the greatest masterpiece, and the greatest risk, won't be on the canvas, but in surrendering her heart and body to the one woman who knows how to make her burn. Follow along and subscribe for more romance-filled lesbian tales. The first time Ilara saw Maeve, it was through a veil of dust and summer sweat. Ilara was wrestling a recalcitrant irrigation line at the edge of her largest field, the one that bordered the narrow county road leading into the sleepy town of Oakhaven. The sun was a merciless brass gong in the sky, and the air shimmered with heat. Her hands, calloused and earth-stained, slipped on the plastic coupling. A muttered curse, ripe and earthy as the soil she tended, was swallowed by the vast, quiet sky. A flash of movement caught her eye. A car, a sensible, dust-coat sedan, was parked just off the road. And standing beside it, one hand shielding her eyes, was a woman. She was a study in contrast to everything surrounding her. Where Ilara's world was shades of brown and green, of practical denim and worn cotton, this woman was a splash of cool watercolor. She wore a simple, pale blue linen dress that hinted at curves rather than clung to them. Her skin was the kind of fair that spoke of indoor pursuits, and a cascade of auburn hair, pulled back in a loose braid, seemed to hold the very light of the sun within it. She was looking not at Ilara, but at the field itself, at the neat, vibrant rows of budding tomatoes, the dark green leaves of squash, the proud, sun-seeking stalks of corn. There was an expression on her face Ilara couldn't quite place. Not just curiosity. It was reverence. Ilara straightened up, wiping her forehead with the back of her arm. The movement drew the woman's gaze. Her eyes, Ilara saw as she took a few steps closer, were the color of moss after a rain, a deep, intelligent green. "Can I help you?" Ilara called out, her voice roughened by the dry air. The woman started slightly, as if pulled from a deep thought. A faint blush crept up her neck. "Oh, no. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to trespass. I was just, it's so beautiful." The statement, so simple and genuine, disarmed Ilara completely. People didn't usually stop to admire a working farm. They saw the romance of a sunset over the fields from their car windows, not the dawn-to-dusk labor it required. "It's a living," Ilara said, a little more gruffly than she intended. She walked to the low stone wall that marked her property line. Up close, the woman was even more striking. Fine features, a dusting of freckles across the bridge of her nose, and those eyes, now looking at Ilara with a spark of curiosity that made her stomach do a funny little flip. "I'm new in town," the woman said, offering a shy smile. "I'm Maeve. Maeve Turner. I just started as the head librarian at the Oakhaven branch." "Ilara Vance," Ilara replied, nodding. "This is all me. The farm, I mean." She gestured vaguely at the acres behind her. "It's incredible," Maeve said, her voice softening with genuine awe. "The organization of it. Each plant in its place, a whole ecosystem you've built. It's like a living library." Ilara blinked. No one had ever described her farm that way. She saw rows of vegetables. This woman, this librarian, saw a card catalogue of crops. A slow smile spread across Ilara's face. "I guess it is. Never thought of it like that. The books are your seedlings." "Exactly," Maeve said, her face lighting up. "And they need the right environment to grow on someone, too. Sunlight, water, good soil," she trailed off, and the blush returned. "I'm sorry, I'm probably sounding ridiculous." "No," Ilara said, and she found she meant it. "Not at all." She looked at Maeve's car. "You heading into town?" "Yes. Just getting my bearings. Learning the roads." "Well, the library's on Maple. Can't miss it. Big brick building that looks like it's been there since the beginning of time." "I found it," Maeve laughed. It was a warm, melodic sound that seemed to dance on the hot air. "Thank you. I should let you get back to your ecosystem." Ilara felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. "Yeah, that hose won't fix itself. Welcome to Oakhaven, Maeve." "Thank you, Ilara. It was nice to meet you." Maeve got back into her car, gave a small wave, and drove off, leaving a small cloud of dust in her wake. Ilara stood by the wall for a long moment, watching the car disappear. The air suddenly felt different. Charged. The scent of dry earth and growing things was now underscored by the faint, ghostly trace of lavender and old paper that seemed to have lingered around Maeve. She shook her head, as if to clear it, and went back to her irrigation line. But for the rest of the afternoon, her focus was split between the task at hand and the memory of moss-green eyes. For Maeve, Oak Haven was supposed to be a quiet refuge. A place to heal after the slow, painful dissolution of a relationship in the city that had left her feeling hollowed out and paper-thin. The library was her sanctuary, a familiar world of order and quiet whispers. But that first week, her mind kept drifting from the Dewey Decimal System to a sun-baked field and a woman with eyes the color of a stormy sky and hands that looked like they could build a world or break one. She found herself taking the long way home, driving slowly past the Vance farm. She never saw Ilara again on those drives, but she saw her work everywhere. The thriving fields, the tidy farmhouse with its wraparound porch, the proud red barn. It spoke of a competence and a deep-rooted strength that Maeve found herself fiercely attracted to. It was a Thursday, a week later, when Ilara walked into the library. Maeve was perched on a small ladder, reshelving travel memoirs in the 910s, when the door opened, letting in a shaft of afternoon light and a woman who seemed to bring the outdoors in with her. Ilara stood for a moment, blinking as her eyes adjusted to the dim, cool light. She wore clean, but well-worn jeans and a simple grey t-shirt that stretched across her shoulders. In her hands, she held a wooden basket. Maeve's breath hitched. She carefully descended the ladder, her heart performing a clumsy rhythm against her ribs. Ilara saw her and smiled, a slightly hesitant quirk of her lips that was utterly endearing. "Hey." "Hi," Maeve said, walking over, smoothing her hands down her skirt. "This is a surprise." "I was in town for supplies," Ilara said, her voice lower here, a quiet rumble in the hushed space. "And, well, I had a surplus." She held out the basket. Maeve looked down. It was overflowing with produce, fat, red strawberries that smelled like concentrated sunshine, deep green zucchini with blossoms still attached, cucumbers with a dusting of earth, and a bundle of herbs that released a fragrant aroma of basil and mint. "Ilara, this is too much," Maeve breathed, touched beyond words. "It'll just go to waste otherwise," Ilara said with a shrug, but her eyes were watching Maeve's reaction closely. "Consider it a welcome-to-town gift. From one curator to another." Maeve took the basket, their fingers brushing. A jolt, sharp and sweet, passed between them. Ilara's hand was warm and rough. Maeve's was cool and soft. The contrast was electrifying. "Thank you," Maeve said, her voice barely a whisper. Would you like a cup of tea?" "As a thank you. I was just about to take my break." Ilara looked surprised, then pleased. "Yeah, I'd like that." In the small staff room, surrounded by boxes of new books and a humming water cooler, they sat at a formica table. Maeve made tea in 2 chipped mugs. Ilara talked about the farm, the early frost scare, the cleverness of crows, the satisfaction of the first harvest. Maeve listened, captivated. She talked about the library, the challenge of getting teens to read, the joy of finding the perfect book for a child, the quiet, persistent magic of stories. They spoke for 20 minutes, but it felt like both a second and a lifetime. When Ilara left, promising to return the next week with more vegetables, the library felt different to Maeve. It wasn't just a refuge anymore. It felt like a place where something new was beginning. The weekly vegetable drop-off became a ritual. Then, the visits stretched into longer talks over tea. Then, one afternoon, Ilara didn't come to the library. Instead, she called. "The meteor shower is tonight," she said, her voice crackling slightly on the line. "The Lyrids. Sky's going to be clear. No light pollution out here. If you wanted to watch it. I have a blanket. And I make a mean hot chocolate." Maeve's heart soared. "Yes," she said, without a moment's hesitation. "What time?" "Come around dusk. We'll get settled." Driving to the farm that evening, Maeve's hands were trembling on the steering wheel. This felt different. This wasn't a chat in a staff room. This was a date. She was sure of it. Ilara was waiting for her on the porch. She'd set up a nest of blankets and pillows on the wide swing and had a thermos and 2 mugs beside her. She looked nervous, her usual solid confidence replaced by a tentative energy that made Maeve's chest ache with affection. "Hey," Ilara said, her smile warm. "Hey yourself," Maeve replied. They sat on the swing, a respectful few inches between them, as the sky deepened from periwinkle to indigo. The first stars pricked through the velvet darkness. Fireflies blinked in the long grass like scattered embers. Ilara poured the hot chocolate, rich and dark and laced with a hint of cinnamon. Their fingers touched again as Maeve took the mug, and this time, neither of them pulled away. Ilara turned her hand, her calloused palm sliding against Maeve's softer one, their fingers intertwining. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Look," Ilara whispered. The first meteor streaked across the sky, a brilliant scratch of light that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Then another. And another. Soon, the heavens were putting on a silent, spectacular show. Shooting stars raced and flared, painting fleeting trails of white fire across the infinite black. Maeve gasped, her head tilted back, utterly enchanted. She felt Ilara's eyes on her, not on the sky. She turned her head. In the dim light, Ilara's features were softened, her eyes dark pools of intensity. "It's beautiful," Maeve breathed. "It is," Ilara said, but she was still looking at Maeve. The air between them grew thick, charged with a tension that had been building for weeks. The unspoken words, the lingering glances, the accidental touches, it all coalesced into this single, perfect moment under the cosmic dance. Slowly, giving Maeve every chance to pull away, Ilara leaned in. Maeve met her halfway. Their first kiss was not a tentative exploration. It was a confirmation. A homecoming. Ilara's lips were softer than Maeve had imagined, yet sure and confident. She tasted of dark chocolate and the wild, sweet air of the farm. Maeve sighed into the kiss, her free hand coming up to cup Ilara's jaw, her thumb stroking the rough, smooth skin of her cheek. The kiss deepened, slow and deep and searching. It was a kiss that held the quiet of the library and the fertile promise of the earth. It was a kiss that tasted of potential. When they finally broke apart, breathless, their foreheads rested together. The meteors continued to blaze overhead, but they were oblivious. "I've wanted to do that since I saw you standing by the road," Ilara whispered, her voice husky. "Me too," Maeve admitted, her own voice unsteady. "I just didn't know it yet." Ilara smiled and kissed her again, a softer, sweeter press of lips that promised more. They stayed on the swing long after the meteor shower faded, wrapped in blankets and each other, talking and kissing under the watchful eyes of the stars. After that night, their world became a delicious secret they built together. Maeve's small, rented cottage on the outskirts of town and Ilara's sprawling farmhouse became their dual sanctuaries. In the library, they were careful, professional. But Maeve would find little gifts left on her desk, a perfect feather from a barn swallow, a smooth, river-washed stone, a single, breathtaking sunflower in a mason jar. And Ilara, when she came to deliver vegetables, would often find a new book waiting for her on the checkout counter. A novel about a woman restoring an old orchard, a book of poetry by Mary Oliver, a historical account of land stewardship. Their love language was one of quiet, thoughtful exchange. But away from prying eyes, their passion burned as hot as the summer sun. One afternoon, a few weeks later, a sudden, torrential rainstorm caught Maeve just as she was leaving the library. She drove to the farm, the windshield wipers struggling against the downpour. She found Ilara in the barn, not seeking shelter, but reveling in it. She was moving potted seedlings from a table near the open door to a more protected spot, her shirt already plastered to her skin, her hair dark and wet. She turned as Maeve entered, her face breaking into a radiant smile. "You're here." "I'm soaked." Maeve laughed, shaking water from her hair. "Come here," Ilara said, her voice dropping to that low, intimate rumble that never failed to make Maeve's knees weak. Maeve walked into her embrace. Ilara's body was solid and warm and wet against hers. The smell of rain on hot earth, of clean sweat, and of Ilara's simple, soapy scent filled Maeve's senses. Ilara's hand slid down her back, pulling her closer, and then they were kissing, a hungry, rain-washed kiss that tasted of storm and desire. "I missed you," Ilara murmured against her lips, her hands roaming over Maeve's rain-soaked blouse. "It's only been a day," Maeve gasped, her own hands sliding under Ilara's wet t-shirt, feeling the powerful muscles of her back flex. "Too long," Ilara insisted, and she walked Maeve backward until she was pressed against the rough, warm wood of a support beam. The rain drummed a frantic rhythm on the tin roof above them, enclosing them in a private, thunderous world. Ilara's mouth found Maeve's neck, kissing and nipping a path to her collarbone. Her hands made quick work of the buttons on Maeve's blouse, pushing the wet fabric aside to expose her lace-clad breasts. A low groan escaped Ilara's throat. "You're so beautiful," she breathed, her calloused thumbs brushing over Maeve's nipples through the lace, making her arch into the touch. Maeve fumbled with the button of Ilara's jeans, her fingers clumsy with need. "I want you," she whispered, her voice ragged. "Right here. Right now." That was all the encouragement Ilara needed. She kicked off her boots, shucked her jeans, and helped Maeve out of her own sodden clothes until they were both naked, skin slick with rain and sweat, pressed together in the humid, hay-scented air of the barn. Ilara sank to her knees, her hands sliding down Maeve's hips, her eyes dark with worship. She kissed the inside of Maeve's thigh, and Maeve trembled, her head falling back against the wood with a soft thud. "Ilara," she moaned. Ilara's answer was to part her folds with a sure touch and press her mouth to her core. The sensation was electric, blinding. Maeve cried out, her fingers tangling in Ilara's wet hair. Ilara held her hips steady, her tongue circling and stroking with an artist's precision, learning the rhythm that made Maeve whimper and the pressure that made her shout. The storm outside mirrored the one building inside Maeve, a rising torrent of pleasure, tightening, coiling, until it broke over her in a crashing, shuddering wave that left her boneless and gasping. Ilara rose, kissing her way up Maeve's body, her own need evident in the feverish heat of her skin. She guided Maeve down onto a pile of clean, sweet-smelling hay she'd piled in a corner for the animals. Maeve, still trembling from her climax, pulled Ilara on top of her. "My turn," she whispered, rolling them over so she straddled Ilara's hips. She took her time. She mapped the landscape of Ilara's body with her hands and mouth, the strong column of her neck, the surprising softness of her breasts, the flat plane of her stomach, the scars and marks that told the story of her work. She worshipped the strength she so admired, kissing the powerful muscles of Ilara's thighs, tasting the salt on her skin. When she finally lowered her mouth to Ilara's center, Ilara let out a broken sob. Maeve loved her with her tongue, slowly, deeply, relentlessly, until Ilara's powerful body was taut as a bowstring, her fists clenched in the hay. She chanted Maeve's name like a prayer, a mantra, until her voice broke on a cry of release that was swallowed by the sound of the rain. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the hay, covered with a horse blanket Ilara pulled down, listening as the storm softened to a gentle patter. Ilara traced idle patterns on Maeve's arm. "I think I'm falling in love with you," Ilara said quietly, the words simple and profound in the post-storm hush. Maeve turned her head, her moss-green eyes soft and sure. "I know I'm already in love with you." They made love again, later, in the farmhouse shower, washing away the hay and sweat, their touches slower, more tender, a gentle exploration that felt just as urgent as their first frantic coupling. As summer bled into autumn, their lives intertwined as seamlessly as the roots in Ilara's fields. Maeve spent her weekends at the farm, learning the rhythms of the land. She'd never dug in the dirt before, but under Ilara's patient guidance, she found a profound peace in the physical labor. She learned to identify weeds, to harvest beans without damaging the plant, to can tomatoes and make jam from the berries they picked together. Ilara, in turn, found a new quietude in the library. She'd always been a reader, but Maeve opened up new worlds for her. They would spend rainy Sunday afternoons curled together on Maeve's sofa, Ilara's head in Maeve's lap as Maeve read aloud from novels or books of poetry. Ilara discovered a love for history, for stories of other times and places, all while anchored by the feel of Maeve's fingers carding through her hair. Their love was a balanced thing, wild and gentle, passionate and serene. It was the heat of the sun and the quiet cool of the stacks. It was the taste of a freshly picked apple and the scent of old paper. One evening in late October, they were walking hand in hand through the harvested fields. The air was crisp, smelling of wood smoke and decaying leaves. The setting sun set the maple trees at the edge of the property ablaze in brilliant red and gold. Ilara stopped, turning to face Maeve. The golden light caught the silver threads in her dark hair and the deep affection in her eyes. "This land has been in my family for 3 generations," she said, her voice serious. "I've poured my heart and soul into it. It's my history. But Maeve," she took both of Maeve's hands in hers, "I want you to be my future. Every harvest, every winter, every spring. I want to fall asleep with you and wake up with you. I want to build a life with you, here." Tears welled in Maeve's eyes. She had found everything she hadn't even known she was looking for. A home, a purpose, a love that was as solid and real as the earth beneath her feet. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. 1,000 times, yes. Ilara pulled a small, simple box from her pocket. Inside wasn't a diamond, but a ring carved from the wood of an ancient apple tree that had stood on the property for 100 years, inlaid with a tiny, smooth piece of green sea glass the color of Maeve's eyes. "It's perfect," Maeve whispered, as Ilara slid it onto her finger. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and violet. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, as the first stars emerged. The farmer and the librarian. 2 different worlds, 2 different kinds of love, woven together into one unbreakable story, waiting to be written through all the seasons to come. Their love was a well-tended garden, a carefully curated library, a harvest of joy that would sustain them for a lifetime. Their happy ending. The old farmhouse, wrapped in the deep, velvety silence of a winter night, held a new kind of warmth. It wasn't just from the wood stove crackling in the corner, though that cast a generous orange glow across the room. It was a warmth that lived in the walls now, woven into the very fabric of the home, born from shared laughter, whispered secrets, and the profound, settled peace of 2 souls who had finally found their place. Ilara stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the moonlit fields, a blanket of pristine snow reflecting the silver light. Her hands, once calloused from solitary labor, now often held a book or, more often, another hand. She felt Maeve's presence before she heard her, a soft footfall on the worn floorboards. Arms slid around her waist from behind, and a chin came to rest on her shoulder. Maeve pressed a soft kiss to the side of her neck, her breath a warm caress. "What are you looking at?" she murmured. "Our future," Ilara said simply, her voice a contented rumble. She turned in the circle of Maeve's arms, drawing her close. Maeve's hair, a cascade of auburn in the firelight, smelled of vanilla and the old books from the library she still lovingly ran. On her finger, the apple wood and sea glass ring caught the flickering light. It had been a year since that autumn proposal. The seasons had turned, and with them, their lives had deepened, roots growing strong and deep, immune to any storm. The town of Oak Haven, after the initial ripple of surprise, had simply folded them into its tapestry. They were Ilara and Maeve, a single unit, as natural and expected as the harvest moon or the first frost. Their love was no longer a frantic, hidden thing. The passion was still there, a banked fire that could flare into a blazing inferno with a single look, a casual touch. But it was tempered now with a profound, unshakable certainty. It was in the way Ilara would automatically reach for Maeve's hand during a walk. It was in the way Maeve would leave a new book on Ilara's pillow, a specific passage underlined just for her. Later, curled together in the big bed under a heavy quilt, their bodies fit together like 2 perfect pieces of a puzzle. Skin against skin, breath mingling, the world outside ceased to exist. There was no need for words. Their language was the slow, worshipful trail of Ilara's fingers down Maeve's spine, the soft sigh as Maeve arched into her touch. It was a conversation of heat and knowing, a dance they knew by heart, each time both a rediscovery and a homecoming. Afterward, wrapped in each other and the quiet, Maeve traced the lines on Ilara's palm. "The library board approved the new community garden plot," she said sleepily. "I told them we had the best consultant in the county." Ilara smiled, pressing a kiss into Maeve's hair. "We'll start the seedlings next month. In the spring." In the spring. The words were full of promise. There would be more seasons. More planting, more harvests. More books to read aloud by the fire. More storms to wait out in each other's arms. More years. They had built a life, not in spite of their differences, but because of them. The farmer and the librarian had found that the most beautiful story wasn't just one of romance or passion, but of partnership. It was the story of a love that was both a sanctuary and a field to be tended, a story to be cherished and a future to be sown, together. And as they drifted off to sleep, tangled in the sheets and each other, they knew the best chapters were still unwritten.